Hey everyone, Kristen here, your host for the Straight Spouse Voices podcast. Today's episode is going to air on November 1st, but today we're actually recording on October 11th, National Coming Out Day. And in honor of National Coming Out Day, I wanted to read a little quote from my friend, playwright, author, and writer Topher Payne. Topher just got married to his love, Daniel, last weekend, and I had the honor and privilege of being at the wedding. It was a day that was a beautiful testament to love winning. In honor of today, National Coming Out Day, Topher posted on Facebook a picture of his mother and father at his wedding last weekend. And this is what he wrote in the post. It's National Coming Out Day. In honor of that, here's Mama and Daddy at our wedding this past Sunday. There was a time when we would have thought this photo was an impossibility. Day one of coming out to my family was rough for everybody involved. Religious teachings, social expectations, fears for my safety and well-being. There was a lot to sort through, and it took time. But on the other side of it, we grew so much stronger as individuals and as a family in ways we couldn't begin to grasp on day one. If you're living with a truth you've come to accept and embrace about yourself, and you're afraid of the response from the people you love, I get it. But give them the chance to grow, because love is a very powerful motivator. And if they cannot meet you where you are, there is a community who will see you and embrace you in all your flawed glory. There is nothing wrong with you. You are beautiful and worthy of love and respect, exactly as you are. Topher, I want to say thank you for that beautiful reminder on National Coming Out Day about how love is a powerful motivator for us to live our authentic, honest lives. And I love the idea so much about giving our loved ones a chance to grow, even when it seems really scary to tell them the truth of who we are. Thank you for that reminder. And now, on with today's show. Our guest today is Seth Blackman. Seth is a 40-year-old father of 2 boys with a career in finance in the automotive industry in Detroit. He was married to a closeted lesbian for 16 years. When his marriage ended painfully in 2016, that experience awakened in Seth a passion for helping others in similar situations. Today, Seth now occupies a leadership position on the Straight Spouse Network board and administrates the Straight Spouse Network Forum. Seth, welcome to the show today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Kristen. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just want to say how lucky the Straight Spouse Network is to have you doing this podcast, because it's really a fantastic venture, and I think you're going to help a lot of people.
Oh, thank you. It's been so exciting so far to be able to reach the people that we've been able to reach. And I hope for bigger and better things in the future for the podcast and for the SSN. So onward and upward. I want to start today's podcast, as I always do with my guests, talking about your particular straight spouse story. And Seth, I've never actually heard yours before. We've talked on the phone before. We, of course, know each other, but I haven't heard your story. So would you please tell us your story of becoming a straight spouse?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I met my ex in college. We were both part of the student newspaper there. We just wound up being friends at first. It wasn't a romantic thing right away. In fact, she actually pursued me after a little while. And that was completely new to me. I had never had a girl pursue me before. We had a blast together. She was like my best friend. I used to brag to my other buddies about how, their girlfriends were taking an hour to get ready to go out to get pizza. And I was out throwing a softball with my girlfriend. She was cool. She was different. So we hit it off again, best friends first. We were also very connected to the same church, and she had recently converted to Christianity and made that much more real in her life. And that was a huge bond for me, because I've always been have had a very strong faith and a strong religion. So we started to get a little bit more serious. At one point, she actually disclosed to me that she had a relationship with a girl in college, and told me that was just a thing of the past. It was, call it an experiment or whatever it was. It was not her. She was attracted to men. She believed it was wrong, and she didn't have any desire to be with a girl. And so I believed that. I thought that was true. And of course, when you're dating somebody and you're in love, you think only the best of them, and you're just not prepared to really research that type of thing when you're 21 years old. So I believed it and, continued dating. We were, again, a strong Christian faith. And like many people in that faith, we chose not to have sex until marriage. I felt I did all the right things religiously and in the courtship process. And, I was really proud of the way that we continued our relationship. And I thought we were going to be blessed to have a fantastic marriage. So we got married. Believe it or not, starting with the honeymoon, I knew already that there was something that was missing. There wasn't the kind of physical intimacy that I expected. But again, being a 22-year-old kid at that point and not having experienced intimacy with anybody else, I didn't know. So I didn't pursue it. I didn't bring it up. I didn't think about divorce. Like, that wasn't even in my lexicon. That wasn't even an option. I had heard stories about how after guys get married, their relationships change, and over time, the activity in the bedroom goes away. And so that's just, I thought that's the way it was. So, we had some very dry years. There were some years there where there was very little intimacy. Never, ever was there an instigation from her, but there was very frequent rejection. And so it was tough on me, but I was able to kind of isolate that part and told myself that I had a fantastic marriage. Aside from the intimacy, we got along fantastically. Again, we were best friends. Just really enjoyed each other's company. We started to build a life together. We went through the ups and downs of career changes and moves across the country, and had 2 little boys, which are, the biggest blessing I could have. So as time went on, my thought process was, the more time and the more life we enjoy together, the more it will cement our relationship. And even though I had some fears that the lack of intimacy was a cause for problem, I was the kind of person who easily said, I'm not going to let that be a fear for me. I'm not going to believe that. I'm only going to believe what my heart allows me to believe. And so years went on, and after about 12 years of marriage, she started to change, and I noticed a change in her. Her religious beliefs began to change. The circle of friends that she associated with changed drastically, to where it was predominantly lesbian women. And over time, my fears started to grow more and more. And then when we hit 16 years, life changed drastically. She had actually finally found a female friend who, to my knowledge, wasn't lesbian. She was married to a guy. And so this was the one time I wasn't worried about it. And turns out this was the relationship that wound up kind of bringing her to realize that she really did need to be, with a woman. So it was a challenging year. We went back and forth and struggled with some miscommunications, and a lot of that drew from my perception that this other woman was more important to her than I was. And so I had begun to snoop, and I had found some emails, proclaiming love, and brought that up and questioned it and said, what's going on? And she said, oh, that's just the way girls talk to each other. Don't worry about it. And here's me saying, well, okay, this can't happen to me. I'm sure I'm just, I'm there's probably not a problem here. I just am making too big a deal out of this, because I didn't want to believe that was possible. One night we had an argument in the morning, and I came home and said, we really need to talk this through and just lay all the cards out on the table and figure out how to get back to being, a good, successful couple here. And that was the night she decided to let me know that she really was a lesbian, and she thought she needed to examine her life and become who she really needed to be and who she felt she was authentically. And that put me into this purgatory for a couple weeks because I wanted to know if she's going to try to continue this marriage or if she wanted to get a divorce. And that was the worst 2 weeks of my life. I mean, hands down, it was not only this crushing reality that my life was never going to go back to the way it was, but also, what's going to happen? Am I destined for divorce and all of the unknowns and the fear? So just that killed me. I mean, I spent 2 weeks just in utter abject horror. Finally, I had to kind of corner her and say, look, I need you to make a decision because I can't keep going on. It's going to literally kill me. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I couldn't function.
Right.
And so she finally said, yeah, I'm going to get a divorce. So we started that process. I found out soon afterwards that she had already been, sleeping with this other woman. And I'll be honest, that was the part that hurt most.
Yeah.
Losing my partner and companion in life, that was awful. But the thing that I craved the most throughout the 16 years of our marriage was that physical, emotional intimacy. And for her to really never give that to me, or at least not without guilt trips or, very, very uncomfortable situations. And then to freely give it to somebody else outside of our marriage. I mean, that cut me so deep. So it was hard.
Thank you for sharing your story. My heart is heavy with recognition because so much of what you said I can relate to in my own experience. The honeymoon signs. My ex-husband and I, we had sex before marriage, but the honeymoon just did not seem like it should have been for, just getting married together. And I can relate very much so to the painful feelings that come around with your spouse never initiating intimacy but being quick to reject intimacy. And I think it really damages a person. Not that it's irreparable and not that we can't recover from it, but I think that we underestimate sometimes how deeply painful that level of rejection from the one person who is supposed to love us the most and desire us and want us really is. And that's a hard thing to come back from. And I'm just touched by how beautifully and vulnerably you just shared that, Seth.
Yeah, you're right that intimacy portion, when you're rejected in that way, it really does leave a mark. I mean, I'll tell you that it impacted me. And I now that I'm 2 years removed, I can look back and see the progression and how that changed me through my adult life. I reached a point where, late in the marriage, I was depressed. I mean, I hadn't gone to see a professional to diagnose that. But over the years, that rejection, it leaves a mark. It changes you. And, so I had reached a point in 2016 where, before I even knew that, before she had disclosed this to me, I was in a bad place. I was just sad, because I had been rejected so much and for so long that I had gotten to a point where I craved the thing that I felt like I needed so much, and I just couldn't get it. You pour yourself into trying to achieve that, and when you don't get it, it makes you feel like a failure, and it really cuts deep.
Right. And of course, when we don't really understand the reason why, the real reason why, we just don't have the truth. We don't have the benefit of understanding the full circumstance. And so it is banging the head against the wall year after year after year, trying to crack the code of why the intimacy is so lacking in the marriage. That's what I experienced. I was constantly trying to solve this problem. Meanwhile, I didn't have all the information to know what I was even up against. So I was never going to be able to solve the problem. So that's a form of gaslighting it is to me a form of psychosexual abuse, that level of gaslighting around the intimacy and around the sexual rejection, whether it's intentional gaslighting or not. We are operating in a circumstance where we don't have all the information we need in order to really understand why our intimate lives are not progressing the way we hope and desire and long for them to. We want that closeness with our spouses, but we just can't seem to get there, and we have no idea what's really happening. And that is, at best, it's inconsiderate, and that's an understatement. At worst, it's cruel.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to characterize that as abuse.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a big word, and
Yeah.
some people may think that's an overreach, but I really do think it's an abuse.
I agree with you 100%. Having been on the receiving end of it, I think it is a deep kind of abuse. It's a rejection in the most personal way a human being can be rejected, and it has lasting impacts on our sexuality, our ability to be vulnerable, to trust, to be safe with somebody, to open ourselves to another relationship going forward in the future, to how we see ourselves as lovers, how we see ourselves as partners, how we see ourselves as desirable or not. It takes a long time to heal from this. We'll take a quick break, and then we're going to be back with more Seth Blackman, and we're actually going to be talking also about a checklist for newbies, and we'll explain what that means after a break. The Straight Spouse Network would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Stephanie Schuyler, who generously offered to sponsor the engineering and editing of the Straight Spouse Voices podcast for the remainder of Season 1. If you think we're doing good work and you'd like to hear more straight spouse stories, please consider offering your financial support at weblink.donorperfect.com/voices. And Stephanie, I would like to personally thank you for your generous and critical support in keeping us on the air. And we're back with more Seth Blackman. So, Seth, you're on the board of the SSN. You're here today specifically. You so beautifully shared with us an aspect of your story that I personally relate to tremendously. I wasn't expecting to relate to it that much, but I did. But you're here today to share with us a newbie checklist. And newbies in the straight spouse community are people who have just recently discovered that their spouse is LGBT. They have been disclosed to, or they have discovered information that leads them to conclude that their spouse is LGBT. And this is a surreal time, and just an unreal time, when you have this material information about your marriage that you didn't know before, and your reality is upended. So tell us a little bit about this checklist for newbies.
Sure. So let me preface this. I remember extremely vividly how awful the first few days and weeks and months of this experience were. And, as I mentioned before, I'm a deeply religious person, and I struggled so much with, this concept of like, why do bad things happen to good people? And what I discovered through this process was that this was really an opportunity for me to take my experience and give back. And if I could help other people, through their own struggle, that made my experience worthwhile. It lended credibility to it and said, okay, it's all right that I went through this. So with that in mind, I poured myself into the Straight Spouse Network forum. And if anybody doesn't know, the Straight Spouse Network does have an open forum. People sign up with an anonymous handle or username and participate in discussions about the whole process of going through the gay thing and talking about the damage that was done and sharing their struggles and difficulties and getting advice and compassion back from others who have experienced that same thing. So, I'm there daily. I'm like constantly on this forum. And what I learned through so many of these discussions is that there are some common themes and advice that we give to people who are fresh in this process. And after a while, I started to see these themes and said, you know what? I think we have an opportunity here to collect all of this knowledge, this group knowledge and wisdom, and collate it and put it together in a way that we can use to help others. So this is not me, this is not my wisdom. This is a group, contributions from everybody, and we just collated it and we put it together and came up with this checklist. And it's suggestions, it's advice to help people get through the immediate first horrible steps of this process. So
Right.
That's what the checklist is, and I'd love to go through it with you.
I would love that. What's on the checklist? What are our steps?
All right. So before we go into anything else, I want to throw this out there. If anybody listening to this is having any thoughts about hurting yourself or taking your life to escape the pain, please know that there is a suicide prevention lifeline, and the number is 1-800-273-8255. And that lifeline is there 24/7. People can help you connect with crisis relief, resources, and just know that this is not a sign of weakness. Don't feel bad about it. It's okay to not be okay. So if anybody is having struggles or thinking about or considering taking their life, please reach out.
Yes.
It just couldn't be more important. So having said that, we've got some sections of this checklist. And the first section is getting professional help, right? None of us are equipped to go through this on our own. None of us have the knowledge or the understanding of what to do and how to take care of ourselves. This is an emotional injury, but it's very real. It's not like breaking your leg. It's probably worse, right? Because it's emotional and we don't know how to deal with that stuff. So the first thing on our list is go see a doctor. Hopefully you've got a primary care physician, somebody that you have a relationship with and they understand you. It is of the utmost importance to go see your doctor first.
Right.
Because the stress that you're going through, the lack of sleep, lack of appetite, the anxiety attacks, these are symptoms that are going to make things so much worse for you. So
Yes.
Talk to a doctor about getting medication to help with these things. And then the second part of this, and we, it's a painful thing to think about. We should always get tested for STDs.
Yes.
Because I don't want to say most, but in many cases, when we found out that our spouse is LGBT, we soon after find out that they haven't been faithful. And, don't put yourself at risk. So, just go get tested. It's really important.
Yes.
So the second part of this section is going to see a therapist or a counselor, right? So just like we're gonna deal with our physical symptoms with a medical doctor, it's equally, if not more important, to go see a professional who can help us deal with the emotional part of this. There are simple emotions like, fear and anger and sadness, but there's a whole lot more complex things too. The trust issues. And, Kristen, you've been through this. You understand how long it takes. And having a professional help you unpack that stuff it's so important.
Right. And it's not uncommon for people to actually have PTSD associated with these kinds of divorces, especially if there has been long-term abuse in the marriage, which can be a factor. And sometimes when we have a closeted spouse and they are in a bad place in their own life with their own grappling with their own sexuality, consciously and unconsciously, that they can lash out in many ways at spouses. We've heard the stories. We understand that this is real. There can really be abuse. So the psychological abuse, emotional abuse, occasionally physical abuse, and PTSD is actually a common symptom from a marriage like this.
Absolutely. And again, I said it before, I'll say it again. It's okay to not be okay, right? I think, and men tend to think, well, that makes me weak if I need to go see help or see a therapist or something like that. It's completely the opposite. Knowing that you need that help and going to get it, that's strength.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. All right. So what have we got next? What's in the second section of the checklist?
So our second section talks about getting support. And again, this is not something that we should try to go through ourselves. Unlike a lot of divorces and domestic issues, other people aren't going to know very well how to help us with this, right? The straight spouse experience is uncommon and people aren't equipped to help us. So we need to take the initiative to try to get the support that we're going to need. And so we've got 3 different kind of bullet points here to talk about getting support. So the first one is just, you've got to start by building a support network that is people around you that you're close to. So a couple of close friends, a couple of family members, somebody that you can count on to be there for you. A lot. I mean, it's a tragedy, but so many straight spouses, they keep the secret. They wrap themselves up in a shell and,
Right.
and they're not willing to share the struggle with others because it's scary. We don't want to out our partner. We don't want to
Right.
burden other people with this complex and confusing situation.
Right. And we're told not to out someone else over and over and over again for very legitimate reasons. But what that does is it leaves the straight spouse in a closet as well. And that is a very traumatic closet. And so I think we have to say what I tend to say to people is, it is your story too. And you have the right to get support from people who are close to you. If that's a small circle of people, but one or two people, a family member, a friend, something like that, like we do get to tell our own stories. That is not the same as maliciously outing a spouse.
Absolutely. And we would never condone that. We're not going to go take out a billboard and say, look, my husband's gay. But we have the absolute right to find a couple close people who are going to be with us through this struggle.
Yes.
So the next point we want to emphasize is you need to find people with similar experience. And this is where the Straight Spouse Network comes in. This is why we exist. So believe it or not, there are other people who have gone through this and who are going through this right now. And there are resources. So the Straight Spouse Network has newsletters and this online forum that we discussed, right? And people can find this, at the end of the show, we'll kind of give a hot link or a website, URL where you can go find this checklist and get support. But one of the biggest things we do is we've got face-to-face network groups in almost every big city in the country. I think we've got a couple maybe missing in the Dakotas now, but for the most part across the country, we have face-to-face groups. And these are people who are going through exactly what you're going through right now. And having a chance to see them and interact with them and hug them and just share and learn it makes such a huge difference. It sure did for me. I mean, I don't know where I would have been without that resource.
Absolutely. There's nothing like being with a group of people who can understand what you're going through without even having to really say a word.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just the knowledge, the support you get from someone who has experienced what you're going through is invaluable. I mean, it makes all the difference.
Yep.
So the third point then in this section, we recommend that if you're a person who is religious or spiritual, or you have, groups that you are affiliated with, please use that. The Straight Spouse Network is not a religious affiliation. We're not going to plug anything, but we understand that spirituality and religion and faith is valuable to people. And this is a great way to find people who can help you maneuver through this experience and help you in that area of your life.
Right. Seth, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back with the rest of the checklist for newbies. Hey, everyone. If you enjoy listening to the Straight Spouse Voices podcast, do us a favor and tell a friend about us and ask them to tune in. We are now available on iHeartRadio as well as iTunes. Also, please rate our podcast on your podcast app. We love every star you give us, especially when you give us all 5. And help us raise our profile by leaving us a review on your podcast app. And if you want to leave comments on an episode, you can do so by following the link in the podcast description. All comments are moderated and anonymous for our protection, as well as yours. And we're back with Seth Blackman and the Straight Spouse Network checklist for newbies. So, Seth, we were on the third section of the checklist. What's in that section?
Sure. So the next section talks about taking care of yourself, right? This is really important that during this time in your life, you step back and be aware that you need to make space and time for yourself to heal. So the first point on this list is be kind to yourself. And I heard people say this to me, and it took me so long to really understand what this meant. So I'll try to kind of describe it. It's okay to experience the emotions that you're going through. It's okay to step back from life as you know it right now so that you can heal, right? If you're involved in a ton of extracurricular activities and stress at work and the struggles that make life difficult enough as it is, you can't expect to be able to go through this incredible storm without giving up a little bit of that. And so it's okay to do that. It's okay to kind of step back a little bit. If you can't get out of bed and you just need to lay in the fetal position and cry, do it. It's okay.
Yeah, I think I stayed in pajamas for about a year with a bottle of wine. Yeah.
You know what? A lot of people don't know this, but if you have a benefit package through work, you can often take either short or long-term disability.
Yeah.
Being diagnosed with depression and trauma from this experience. That's what I did.
Yep.
I wound up taking 3 weeks away from work, and honestly, I should have taken 6 months. They would have let me.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't think hardly any people really understand that, and that's what it's for. You should.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Then the second point here is just avoid stress, right? You've got enough going on. This is a ridiculously difficult time. So if there are things that are stressful to you, just push them away, push them back. A lot of people, when they first find out, they immediately say, okay, I'm going to get a divorce, right? And divorce is incredibly stressful. There's so many things you don't know about your future, and how are you going to deal with the finances and the legal issues and child custody, and these are decisions that you will eventually have to make. So let them come in time.
Right.
I struggled so much with this because I'm a planner, right? So I don't even know if I'm getting divorced yet, and I'm already trying to figure out, where am I going to live and what kind of apartment, and where am I going to find a garage big enough for my cars? And if you can figure out how to just put aside decisions that you can't even make today anyway.
Yes.
You don't have all the details. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
Just deal with today and let those challenges come when they come.
That's so true. One of the mantras that I repeated to myself regularly during my time with my ex-husband was, I don't have to decide that today. Anytime there was something that I was getting wrought about or stressed about, I would repeat that to myself. I don't have to decide that today.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, what's next?
All right. Third point, and again, this is still, the topic here is take care of yourself. So stop having intimacy with your spouse.
Yes.
And this sounds like maybe it's out of left field, but there's a concept called trauma bonding where, when we go through a difficult time, we look to the person that has always been there for us and that we think loves us the most as though they're going to be there to help us through this. And trauma bonding especially, is like physical intimacy. So I see it a lot. People, they found out their husband's gay, but they're still being intimate with them. And this is really damaging. And it seems natural because, again, this is where you've always gone to for support and help. You've got to break that, not only from the emotional damage containment standpoint, but also for your safety. Again, we talked about getting checked for STDs, and if your spouse is maybe cheating on the side and you don't know that yet, you are leaving yourself open to possibly permanent health problems. So
right,
as hard as it is, just put that away, put that aside.
All right, what's next?
All right, the last section here is adjust your mindset.
Okay.
So we're going to change our way of thinking. So the first one, and this is maybe one of the most important things, please don't blame yourself. Please don't feel ashamed or guilty. I don't know if you did, but I sure did. I blame myself. I felt ashamed. I'm like, how could I have been so stupid? How did I not know this? How did I not see those clues? And we've got to understand that we weren't programmed to see those things. We're programmed when we fall in love, we think the best of that person. And, because they're gay, that doesn't mean we did anything wrong. We were fooled, we were lied to. It's not our fault. And I know that we all think there's this stigma around, your partner's gay and that means something about us. And it couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
Right. So it's really important. I see so many new people sign up on the forum and their first post, like the first paragraph is, I feel so ashamed of myself.
Yes.
And we can't. When we feel that guilt or that blame on ourselves, it just makes our recovery process so much harder.
It always, of course, I didn't know my ex was gay immediately. It took years before I got the disclosure from his second ex-wife. So when I did learn the truth that I had suspected for quite some time, I felt so foolish for a time. And I came to a place where it was like, when someone is intent on staying in the closet, sometimes there will be extraordinary lengths gone to in order to keep that secret. And we are not responsible for seeing what we could not see.
We never had a chance.
Yeah, we never had a chance.
Right. I mean, these, I don't want to say these people, it sounds terrible, but, imagine somebody who finds out at a young age that they're different and they don't want to be different because society is harsh and cruel. So they put everything into creating a persona
Yes.
of who they want to be and who they want the world to see them as. So they've been practicing this. The most important thing in their entire life is building this persona and protecting this, since a young age. You can't feel guilty for not having seen this.
Right. Okay, what's next?
Okay, assert yourself. A lot of times as spouses, and this was me, right? I told you earlier that I sat and waited for weeks for my ex to decide whether or not she was going to leave. I think a lot of times we become secondary. We've learned to put our spouse first. When we reach this point in our lives and the world's crashing down around us, we have to assert ourselves. We have a voice,
Mm-hmm.
and we get to make decisions about what's going to happen in our life.
Yes.
We don't need to wait for the gay husband to decide if they're going to leave with their new partner.
Right.
Set a boundary, figure out what you're comfortable with, and you get to make those decisions for yourself.
Right. We get to start asking ourselves, what do I want for my life, rather than waiting to be told what my life is going to be when this other person decides what their life is going to be. We get to start asking ourselves, even if the answer is, I don't know what I want my life to be. Even if we don't know the answer, we don't have to know the answer. It's important to start asking that question. Well, what do I want?
Absolutely.
Yes. Great. All right. And next?
All right. We need to recognize that this whole recovery process is a roller coaster. I see people in these emotional situations, right? Because that's what our forum's really great for, is people getting a chance to vent and share their emotions. And what I see is people seem to think that at their lowest point, this is now permanent. And you start to think, well, how can I ever claw my way out of this? I don't want to live this life. This is awful. But we need to realize that there are ups and downs with emotions. And this can be on an hourly basis or a daily basis. We go through these ups and downs. And so when you're going through the worst of it, and this is the morning when you decide, what, I just cannot get out of bed today. I'm going to stay here with a box of tissues, and this is all I can do today. Understand that this is not permanent, right? You are in this down period, and just naturally over time, whether it be in an hour or a couple hours or tomorrow morning, you will feel better. And just the knowledge that this is temporary will help you understand that it will pass.
Yes.
And so I just want people to understand that there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. And at the start of the process, there's a lot more downs than ups. And those downs are a lot deeper and they last a lot longer. But as the process moves, it's like the opposite of a normal roller coaster, right? Because we're going to go against gravity. You're going to get more ups. It's going to go uphill. And eventually things are going to even out and it's going to become more smooth and just a safe ride.
Yes.
And you'll get through it.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. And next?
Allow yourself to feel and express the emotions that you have, right? We said earlier, it's okay to not be okay. If you're in the line at the grocery store and you are overcome with emotions and you just need to cry, go ahead and cry. A lot of people will force down those emotions and pack them away and never let them out. And that's going to come back to bite you later.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So, if you need to scream, scream. If you need to cry, cry. If you got to punch something, find something soft, but punch.
Right.
Allow yourself to feel and experience and outlet those emotions. Next on our list is this point, you are not required to support their journey.
Right.
They will have people that will support them, and they deserve support. Even though what they've done to us is maybe not so good, there are other people that will be in their arena. We are not required to be that person for them. We do not have to champion their coming out and their new life. And, we don't have to outwardly say, oh, I'm so happy for you.
Right.
Right. Because what they've done to us and what our lives have turned into because of their journey is awful. And we should not be required to embrace the awful.
Right. This is so fascinating because I think that eventually may happen. There may become a reconciliation. There's no rule book. For some couples, that's not possible. There's a separation, going separate ways, and that is aligned and authentic and right as a choice. It's authentic for me to have no contact with my ex. It's also safe. And for others, it is authentic to have a reconciliation. But we also don't have to put pressure on ourselves to make it look a certain way for people outside of the relationship. We have a whole other process that we need to go through, and we are entitled to the time that it takes.
Absolutely. I think through the experience, most straight spouses are supporters of the LGBT community.
Yes.
Because we understand it better than a lot of people do.
Yes.
So we're not saying that you should be anti by any means, but you should never be required to support something that is hurtful to you at that time.
Right.
So, you ready for the last one?
Yes. Bring it.
You can do it. This is so overwhelming when you are in the early stages of this process, but you'll get through it. I like to describe it as being in a storm. Imagine yourself out on the ocean and you're in a little boat and waves are crashing and the skies are dark and the only thing you can see is black and rain and you can't imagine how life could possibly improve, because as human beings we're just not programmed to really be able to grasp those theories of what life could be in the future. We see what's in front of us, and right now in this experience all you see is loss.
Right.
Our families are being ripped apart, our relationships, our trust in ourselves and what we thought we knew, and our history and our past, everything is being taken from us. So this seems like the world is ending, and it's not. We just need to know that there is beauty out there when the storm passes. Things will get better. You have a new opportunity to rewrite your life, and there is so much beauty out there. You just got to get through this. So I want people to know you can do it. Take it a day at a time. You will find the strength for each one of those days, and you'll get through it, and you'll get through the next day and the next day. And eventually you look back and say, whoa, I'm okay. I did it. I'm optimistic. And that's where I am now. I'm 2 years out from this process, almost 2.5. Life is so much different now. And it's great. It's happy. It's wonderful. There's optimism in my future. But I remember so vividly how I felt in those early days. Didn't think I could do it. But I just wanted everybody to know you can, you will.
Thank you so much for that reminder, because you're so right. When we're in the storm, it's hard to even contemplate that there will be a day again when there is no rain. But for the newbies who are in that moment when they're questioning everything, one of the big questions on their minds is, oh my God, will I ever love again? And that is possible, is it not, Seth?
It is possible, Kristen. And let's state that not everybody has to find a partner again. You can be perfectly happy if you never do.
Right.
But in my experience, I've recently had the opportunity to enter into a relationship with the most amazing woman. And it is a revelation. When you've been through a marriage with somebody who is not authentic and not straight, the experience of being with somebody who is authentic and feminine and it's so awesome. It's so amazing. And I couldn't be more excited.
Kind of mind-blowing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It's just like, wow, this is what it was supposed to be like all along.
Right. It's revelatory. Well, Seth, I can't thank you enough for for walking us through this brilliant checklist for newbies and actually for some of us veterans too. It's good to be reminded of some of these things as well, because it's a cyclical thing. It's not like a one and done. The healing process loops back upon itself, and it takes time, and it's messy. It's not a linear process. So for some of us who have been down the road for a little while, it's good to even reconnect with some of these ideas as well. We're at time. So before we go, I just wanted to ask if you had any links or websites you wanted to refer people to for resources, obviously the Straight Spouse Network, but was there anything else that you wanted to throw out there for our listeners?
Yes, thank you. So if anybody's interested, please do look up the Straight Spouse Forum, and that is at straightspouse.boardhost.com. Or you can find it, there's a link on the right side. If you go to the Straight Spouse Network webpage, you will find a link to the open forum. It's a black box with red text. It'll be on the right side of the page. And, come sign up. It's anonymous. You don't have to give your name or any information. Take a look. Check it out. Come, join in the conversations there, because there's great stuff.
Well, Seth, thank you again so much for this wonderful episode that I know is going to be so helpful to so many people. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest today.
Thanks so much, Kristen.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. As I mentioned at an earlier break, if you could tell one person about our podcast, ask them to tune in and listen and tell them how really great it is and helpful, that would be fantastic. We need to expand our listenership. And to Brian Pickrell, our engineer and editor, who is constantly upping his game, thank you for working on our episode tonight. And everybody else, this is Kristen, your host, reminding you that until next time, keep using your voice.